Good afternoon, everyone. Thanks so much for joining us on this exciting talk on how to make VR more accessible to a wider population, which is something that I feel like often receives way too little attention, but is so important, especially for clinical uses of virtual reality. This webinar is hosted by the USC Smart VR Center, which is funded by the USC Office of Research. And to learn more about our center and our events, you can see our website at smartvr.usc.edu, or you can follow us on Twitter at USC_SmartVR. So I'm Dr. Sook-Lei Liew. I'm an associate professor here at the University of Southern California and co-director of the USC Smart VR Center. And joining us today is Jeff Rayner, who's co-founder and CEO of MXTreality, and Greg Bednarski, who's the founder of WalkinVR. So I know we have a lot to talk about and they have a lot of exciting things to share. So we'll just go ahead and get started, and we'll begin with Jeff.
All right, I'll share my screen. Just try to share everything. All right, everybody see that?
Good.
Do you see all these pop-ups all over it? Hopefully not.
I don't see pop-ups. I just see the slides.
Okay, excellent, excellent. Okay, let's begin. So hi, I'm Jeff Rayner. I'm going to talk to you a little bit today about how we live in an unfair world, but with a little bit of luck and a good amount of work, we can actually change that, and VR can really play a role. There's a couple of these little phrases with tags that you'll see me put in here. But in general, VR is incredible, right? It opens so many doors, it removes barriers, it allows anybody to be anyone, go anywhere, do anything, unless you have accessibility needs. And for some folk, it's still fantastic, but there's still a very long way to go. So during the next 20 minutes, I'm going to talk a little bit about some of the things that developers like myself are doing, as well as some ways that the audience can get involved and actually make this world a better place. We started our company about 8 years ago, and we soon figured out that we wanted to create worlds that could be experienced on any device going. I would love to say we were accessibility focused. We were not. And to be honest, we still aren't. We are what I call accessibility conscious, as in we're a small company and we're doing what we can to try and make the world a little bit better place. But how we got into the accessibility world was we made an experience when Google Cardboard first came out, and it leveraged the gyroscope and the accelerometer on a phone. What that meant is when you put your phone either into a headset or you just held it and you physically moved, it would track those movements with the accelerometer and the gyroscope. So every tilt, every movement you make, you wobble as you walk, we would track that. And therefore we could make you move in what then we called VR. And it was fantastic. And we started this little game and it got some popularity, and then we started to get some feedback. And we started looking at what that feedback was, and we realized there were people saying, this is the first VR game, or in some cases, the first phone game that they've been able to properly play. And the reason being, you didn't need your hands to know or to play it, because you just needed movement. That meant if you had it in your headset, you could just do this. If you had it in your arms, you could just do this. You didn't actually have to move. So this was like a nuanced thing that we created, where we were making an adaptable game, an accessible game, without fully understanding it at first. As we reached out to that community and everybody else, to be fair, one of the things we learned from the accessible group were we needed to do more. And in doing so, we listened to what they were saying. One person was saying, I can play this and I've only got one hand. Somebody said, I can play this and I've got no arms. Somebody said, I can play this and I'm in a wheelchair. Somebody said, I can play this and I'm a tetraplegic. And we realized, how could we adapt this to make it easier for them? And we heard one of the things was banging your head around for 20 minutes or so to solve these puzzles got old pretty quickly. So we adapted and learned from them, and we made the gyroscope and accelerometer much more sensitive. Not only did it therefore make it better and more user-friendly for that group, it also meant that we could run, walk, fly, jump, duck And so we realized from that point on, we need to listen to the accessibility community because it makes a better solution for everyone in doing so. If anybody's into Ted Lasso, there's just so many life lessons in there. This is one from last week's session, but I just thought it was such a good quote. I had one of mine here and I took it out and put this one in instead because I thought it did a better job. Making better things to make things better. That's kind of our mantra at our company. So let's talk a bit about the what, the why, the where, the when, the how. Let's start with the what. So what do we mean by VR accessibility? This is not, there's lots of definitions. This is our definition of it, but basically making some hardware and software where we attempt to make that experience the same for everybody who tries it, irrespective of a visual or physical impairment. And it's amazing actually that so many people are scared off about it, and there's still an even larger potential or larger population of developers that just aren't even fully aware of what it means. And you can't make something suitable for everyone, but what you can do is some small things very easily actually to make it more accessible and more usable for everyone. And these can be really simple things. And I've broken them out here very quickly onto two kind of categories. One, which is vision and hearing. The other are more physical disabilities with walking or hand control. But if we think about even from a visual perspective, VR is very vision dominant. Everything you see and do is a large part of the experience today. It doesn't need to be that way. Obviously, us as humans often are that way, but in fact, we pick up on so much more. And one of the things we're doing is trying to include all of those extra sensory things in there to make it better. But from a general developer perspective, we can improve the text font as well as the size. We can change the colors to make them more suitable. We can add voiceovers when you interact with things or when you're being guided to what to do next, and add simple haptics into the VR controllers. Really small things that absolutely every developer out there can do today and takes them minutes. It's just one of those things we have to make everybody aware so they actually know what they have to do. Then we go on to the kind of a bit more deeper with some additional options, but this is where it becomes very exciting, not only for those with physical disabilities and impairments, but again, this actually offers better experiences for everyone. So adding more peripherals, things like the Xbox Adaptive Controller, one-handed joysticks, full joystick controls, button controls. Just think about it. If you've got, and you see my picture there, if you actually have a damaged thumb or lack of use of that thumb, trying to use a VR controller is really, really difficult. But there are definite workarounds. One of the things we've found, for example, if you make your experience VR compatible with a joystick, what that means is it opens up about 20 different peripheral devices that are really good for the accessibility community to control. Xbox Adaptive Controller is one of them. There's a wide array of different joysticks and keyboard additions and buttons and things that all come from the joystick add-on. So really simple things you can do. But imagine just doing things like turning around and angles, which I'll go into in a bit more in a moment. But if you're in a wheelchair, for example, how do you physically turn if you can't physically turn, or makes it really hard to? So a lot of it comes down to, can we offer an option that simplifies the movement and the interaction? And the easy answer is yes, you can. The last point I'm going to come back to in a moment as well, but that is, when you do face a big barrier, consider just making a simple version of the experience, so at least everybody does get that option. So what do I mean by different tech and hardware and software, these terms that are being thrown out there that actually really can make a difference? These are some of the things we've certainly tried to implement, not in every experience we can, but in those where it matters. So on the hardware side, we can actually just tap into the things like joysticks and sip and puff and head arrays, which are very wheelchair centric, but also things like haptic vest. Imagine if you are deaf and you're not hearing those sounds. By adding a haptic vest, you can actually feel those sounds. Same thing for smells. and haptic vest in that regard, it's something that adds to the experience and actually opens it up for everybody. Gaze tracking is a simple way, rather than using your hands, you can actually move your head, and there's essentially like an invisible beam coming out of your head that points to a location, and then you can interact with those objects. And the controllers for those, for the VR developers, is actually very easy to implement. On a more technical standpoint, which is still very possible because even small companies like ours can do it, adding things like voice guidance, hand tracking, eye tracking, and even in some places, some brain control interfaces that sound so out there, but in fact, you can buy these stuff off the shelf. You can make your own for about $100, and you can actually do some very interesting things with those to just simplify the whole control. Taking that to the next level of some of the things that we're doing, for example, is in Mars VR right now that we're creating. We're looking at all the different peripherals, not only those that are very accessibility directed, things like the Xbox Adaptive Controller, but also things that just might make the experience better, as well as more intuitive for some. So for example, on the right-hand side, there are 4 different ways you'll be able to move in addition to the hand controllers. Saber shoes, a 3D rudder, Infinideck, and the walk box. These are all different methods that you can use to move around in an experience, and they're particularly useful if you have limited hand and arm movements. We have some virtual smells, we have a driving wheel, we have a Your VR, and we're even integrating some joysticks and haptic bodysuit as well, just for full immersion. Whereas this isn't going to be applicable to everyone, but as I said earlier, when you start going down that path, you realize adding on additional peripherals to have a deeper experience is actually not that hard. So why would anybody do this? Why would anybody care about adding accessible options? And it's pretty simple. First of all, it's just the right thing to do. I have a very quick experience I like to listen to. I'm just going to pull up my Twitter feed here, just to it's just a nice way of doing it. And you can just listen to this gentleman talk about one of his experiences with us.
Can you tell us what you just did?
I hope you can hear that.
Well, I just did the Seattle Sky Ride, and the opportunity to get engaged in that was so immersive. It allowed me to experience full body motion, and I felt as though I had my body back, in that the way I was moving and what I was feeling was on the carpet. I mean, it gave me the sense I have the rush of actually experiencing the carpet ride. And I know that it was the second time I did it, I kind of knew where we're going, and I could kind of gauge where we're going, and it allowed me to be able to participate with the game and explore the Seattle skyline like I never had before. And so I could anticipate the bank, and I could position my body in a way that it felt as though I was fully engaged in the event. Yeah.
And now, how long have you been paralyzed?
45 years.
45 years. Wow. Could you feel anything in your legs?
I was feeling it appeared like I was on my knees, and I felt my hip flexors and my torso, and as if I was using it again. Obviously not, but I had the sensation that I was fully in the moment. Wow.
Can you tell us what you just did? So hopefully you guys could hear that. Let me know if you couldn't.
It sounded good. We could hear it.
Oh, did? Okay, perfect. All right. So those moments are just magical. Now, this is an experience that we built for fully able people originally, and then we just adapted a second version to make it accessible to everybody by taking out the necessity for the controllers. And when you hear things like this man, 45 years, is now able to feel some parts of his body that he hadn't before. And that's exactly what we actually built this for. Again, from experimentation, and we get a disability group that comes in to help us test, some friends and family and just people we know that are willing to try some of our experiences out to see how accessible they are. It really doesn't take, again, much effort, but you hear what they have to say and we adapt accordingly. In this case, we made an experience for those with spinal cord injuries to help them feel different parts of their body again. But in doing so, it made a better experience for everybody else who tried the experience too. So some other kind of stories and use cases that we've had. Jesse, he's now able to do things that he never thought was possible. We often say that as VR developers, we are essentially digital storytellers, right? And being able to take people places that they can't actually go, irrespective of disability, but especially important for those that have difficulty. Jeremy is a wonderful guy who has ALS, and he only has movement of his eyes. He gave me a quote that brought tears to my eyes, as well as made us really chuckle. He said after doing an experience, it's the first time he's felt his butthole in 18 years. And as odd as that sounds, we've heard numerous stories like this, that you forget what different parts of your body feel like when you have certain disabilities. And so in VR, we can give you superpowers. We can allow you to do things that you can't do any other way, which is wonderful. This last part with Jonathan is actually being able to not only play games, but give them options, give people options to collaborate, work together, and actually potentially have employment in the near future as well. Second reason, money, right? About 20% of the world, 20% have a disability. At the minute, the vast majority of these people are being ignored and forgotten about. So there is a very large business case for actually looking after and trying to support everyone. The third and final reason on this is back to that quote I said earlier. If we make better things, it actually makes everything better. In this case, there's several stories we could use from this picture alone. One is using a GoPro camera that we stuck on a friend with a spinal cord injury in a wheelchair, going through the entry and actually for the whole day at a stadium. He was scared to go to the stadium, was really uncomfortable about it. We stuck a headset on him, a 360 camera on him. And after that point, lots of others could see what it was like, see what he could go through. It also helped the stadium understand what it's like to be somebody in a wheelchair going through the stadium and all the complications that arise because of it. So it was, again, better for everyone. So when do we need to do this? The key is now. Greg's going to talk about a wonderful story in a moment. But when we actually even first learned of Greg and WalkinVR, one of the reasons was, we've got lots of videos on this too, when you're in a wheelchair, often in VR, you're actually at an angle. What that means is you're constantly looking at the sky, or a little bit. That makes VR experiences really hard, because often you need to look straight or even sometimes down to understand what's around you. So if you're tilted even a little bit, it's a really jarring experience. We figured out how to adjust that. And that's when we learned that people like Greg and WalkinVR have taken that to the next level. But little things like this, just 1% effort, I call it, because all you have to do is think about, how's somebody going to experience this? Can I make a change to help them out? And almost always the answer is yes. So how can we make these inclusive experiences? I say 1, 2, and 3. What that means is, identify the problems, identify the user base, identify some ways that you can do some cool things. There are tons of tools already out there, and just go explore. If you're building a game, you can actually find things that are out there. If you are in the disabled community and you need accessible solutions, hardware and software, there are things out there too that are really trying to make everybody's world difference. And lastly on this, freedom, right? By identifying the problems, figuring out the solutions, building some tools around it, or integrating them in, it gives everybody that freedom to do anything. Along those lines, you can see one of our works here, one of our team, he actually, while he was building our wheelchair experience, so we're teaching people how to drive a wheelchair in unnatural conditions, for example, going down a really steep slope. You don't want to try that in the real world and get it wrong. So we build it in VR so that you can try it in VR, understand the capabilities of that wheelchair first. But he actually sat in that wheelchair for about a month every day. So he not only knew what he was building, he could feel what it was going to be like. So what does all this mean? There are essentially 3 areas that I've noted here that we can really go into. I'm not going to list them all, but I'm happy to send this out, that everyone kind of should help take away some key things. VR and accessibility applications are numerous. right? Not only in the gaming area, but we as well as lots of our partners and lots of other companies out there. Greg in a moment is going to talk about some of the rehab and therapy stuff, but we're doing things in those, as well as we're teaching people to read, we're helping people walk again, we're obviously doing the entertainment, but we're doing lots of things around education, particularly for neurodiverse learners. And all of these things hopefully will help get people even back to work and give them a sense of confidence they can do things. And VR really can do that. Another area is just community, especially in today's times. It's easily to be isolated. So getting people to be able to get together is just a fantastic thing. I'm not going to go through all of these different areas of the beneficiaries, but essentially so many different people with so many different backgrounds can benefit from some simple things that every one of us can do. I've had some name drops. I said I send this out afterwards, but if you're not familiar with the accessibility community, it is growing. People realize there is a problem, and they're actively coming together to figure out how can we do better things. There are things like XR Access and even OpenXR that are actively looking at how can we make VR more accessible. WalkinVR has what I call a wrapper solution. So independent of people like us trying to create an experience for one-off games, WalkinVR has created an experience or a solution that goes across games. So, and I don't want to spoil Greg's thunder, so I'll let him talk about that in just a moment. Also, Seeing VR, if you're not familiar with that, is a fantastic load of plugins that you can put into a VR experience to help people with low vision. So key takeaways, everybody matters. Just doing a little bit will make a huge difference overall. Start small, and you really can do some things that will make your game, your experience that much more accessible to others. And in doing so, just think about, for example, Mars VR. We've now done a 360 version of it, so that that opens up even more doors. We've got a full VR experience, but not everybody has a VR headset. Not everybody has the full capability of moving around in there. So we've done a 360 version. It's a light version, but it therefore offers everybody some kind of experience. But at the end of the day, everybody wins from making accessible solutions. You get more users, you get more feedback, you get more interest, and then potentially you get a lot more money too. So back to my initial expression, reality sucks. VR sucks originally, but in truth, it's the reality that sucks. But VR can help. We can give superpowers. We can give you abilities. We just need developers to keep pushing the boundaries of what's possible. So with that, I'm going to pass it over to Greg. But thank you very much. I look forward to some questions in a moment.
Thank you so much, Jeff. That was awesome and very enlightening. And I think it really sets the stage for thinking about different accessible solutions in VR. So as Jeff said, we'll hold questions till the end, but you're also welcome to put them in the chat if you'd like. And we'll also have time after Greg speaks to do an open discussion with everyone. All right, Greg, go ahead and take it away. And thanks again, Jeff.
Okay. Am I sharing the screen?
It says that you've started screen sharing, but we don't. Oh, here it comes. Yep, looks good.
Okay, so thank you for invitation, and thank you, Jeff, for great overview of the problem of accessibility and adaptation. I decided to change a little bit my plan in last 5 minutes. So I decided not to show my presentation because I think it wouldn't be so interesting. I cover similar things, and I have quite good videos, I think, and I think it will be more beneficial if we go through these videos. So I will just give now a short introduction. So basically, it was already said, right? In virtual reality, in order to play, you have to move around. And in hands, we usually hold the controllers. We move them, we press the buttons. And if we cannot move our hands, we cannot I'm missing the word. We cannot handle the controllers. We cannot use them properly, right? If we cannot move our hands. And WalkinVR is basically a project who is adapting existing games to such cases. So what does it mean, existing games? It means that there is a big, let's say, repository of games. They are very high quality. They are very engaging. They are, the people just basically pay the money to play those games, right? But they are not available for people with disabilities because of the problem like this one with holding the controllers. And what is WalkinVR is basically a software, a solution that is doing some kind of adaptations for the, we can say it's probably not 100%, but basically a lot of titles from this repository of games with WalkinVR, with different techniques which are available in WalkinVR, can be made accessible, right? And yeah, okay. And I think I will just show a video. So now, okay, do you see a YouTube channel?
Yeah, looks good.
Virtual reality can be an amazing thing. It gives people the opportunity to experience things they wouldn't otherwise be able to, like flying or traveling through space, as well as more down-to-earth activities such as just getting a good workout. It's not quite so easy for everyone though. With virtual reality, or VR, you use real-world movements to control your actions in the virtual world. This is a big part of what makes it so immersive. But what happens when your real-world movements are limited as a result of disability? It means some VR games and experiences are simply not an option for you. For example, a game may require you to turn around, but if you use a wheelchair, that's not so easy, especially if you're holding the controllers. And some disabilities mean you can't grip things firmly, so you may not be able to hold the controllers at all, or you might have problems using the buttons. Thankfully, there's a solution. WalkinVR is software that allows you to adapt to VR environment so that limitations in your movement don't have to mean limitations in gameplay. It works on the Steam platform and integrates with the Steam VR environment, meaning it can be used successfully with almost any game. Let's look at 4 ways WalkinVR can adapt an existing virtual reality environment to make it more usable by people with disabilities. The first is a feature called virtual movement. This is helpful for when you can't walk, but you can move your hands and hold a controller. To use it, you simply grab space with a button and then move or turn around. The second is controller position. Okay,
so I will say maybe a few words about each feature. So virtual movement was very first element available in WalkinVR. It was actually the idea that made me start this project, because I discovered this like by accident, because I was sitting, I made this feature for something else basically. And then I use it while sitting instead of moving. And I said, oh my God, I'm just sitting and I just moved in VR. So basically it works in this way that you just grab the space and move it, right? So instead of going forward, you grab the space and move it to yourself. And it's basically trivial solution, but it allows to play many games for people. But I must say that about this particular problem, the situation has improved, because many games now offer ability to pick up the things without going to the ground. Like, for example, this game Job Simulator, if you just put the hand above something on the ground, it will, let's say, jump to your hand. So it's better. There is also in many games option like snap turn. So it's basically rotating you by 15 or 45 degrees to the left and right. But this virtual movement is giving you ability to that when you are wealthy, you don't think about it, because it's not problem for you to move forward 10 centimeters, right? It's just like this, right? It's almost it's a very natural thing. But when you are on wheelchair and you are holding controllers and you have to balance your body to emulate this movement instead of just do it, then you use these features kind often, right? Just grab the space and okay, so let's see what we got.
Is controller position adjustment. With a condition like muscular dystrophy, for example, you might be able to hold the controllers, but not maintain them at the height required by the game. Position adaptation allows you to adjust the position in which the controllers are visible in the VR environment. In the simplest case, this means showing the controllers higher in VR than they are in reality. But there are more advanced options too, like using rotation, or the distance the controllers are from your body. The boost part of this feature amplifies your physical gestures. This turns small movements in the real world into much larger ones in the VR environment, making it easier to pick up or throw virtual items. This can be...
Yeah, and you see that these are simple things, right? It's and I have feedback from people that they use it a lot. And also these games, each of these games is probably one of the top 20 games on the store, and now they are available, now they are accessible, right, with these simple things. So this is also important,
particularly helpful if you have a limited range of hand or arm movements. Oh, and you can also adjust the controller position for each hand individually. This can be helpful where one hand or arm is weaker than the other, for those that have had a stroke, say.
Yeah, and when I was recording other video, there was a patient with a stroke, and they was using exactly this game, which is Fruit Ninja, and he was playing Fruit Ninja with the hand after stroke. So basically, they put a controller in the hand which has the problem, which was after, I don't know, maybe it's not the correct word, but partially paralyzed, and adjusted position of this hand. And the patient actually tried to play this hand, right? So basically, the hand was on the level of the hip, which he couldn't see normally. And if you have therapy session and the therapist tell you, do something with your hand, you are doing it because you're supposed to do it, right? Because he tells you to do it because you want to get better. But if you have this gameplay and you have this hand, let's say lower, but in VR you can see it here, you are naturally engaged to do the things, right? And I've seen it works also on other cases, that it basically works. I've seen also there was a boy who was just playing all the time with the right hand because it was stronger, and left hand was weaker. So we took away the stronger hand and put in front of the eyes the weaker hand, and we see also that he was starting to doing something, because when he was seeing the stronger hand, if his father or the therapist couldn't force him to use the weaker hand, because he was not listening to them. He was all the time using the stronger hand, and they was just telling him, please use the other hand. And he was like about 9-10 years, he was just not listening, right? But when we swap his hands to his eyes, he just naturally started using the weaker hand, right? So this is this virtual adjustment feature.
Each can compensate for the weaker arm, enabling you to bring the virtual hand up into your field of view. This is something that can have a positive psychological effect. And there are more parameters that you can adjust besides. The third feature is gameplay with personal assistant. Some people can move the controllers well enough, but have problems with buttons and other tactile aspects of gameplay. Gameplay with personal assistant allows another person to assist the disabled player using a separate game.
You see, I will replay it again.
Personal assistant.
You see, the player now is away from the dog, and the therapist is using controller to adjust the position. So he's moving the player closer to the dog. And again, if you're healthy, you don't think about it, right? It's everything is obvious, right? You just move a little bit forward and just pet the dog. But if you are on wheelchair, and especially if you hold the controllers, then it's quite problematic, right? So you see he's, let's say, making the closer, sorry, he's moving the player closer to the dog.
Allows another person to assist the disabled player using a separate game controller. They can make helpful adjustments to the VR position and also perform button presses, making gameplay easier for the disabled user.
Yeah, so this is another case, right? Normally you have to press the trigger or grip button, and here you don't have to do it. You just, there are two options. You can attach the controller to your hand, but you don't need to press the buttons, or you just use hand tracking, which I show later. And then it's enough to just move your hand to this, and the therapist or the carer will press the buttons for you. I was playing a few times in this way, and I would say it's quite funny because you can even play together. Like, oh, go there. Oh, do you have it? Yes, I have it. Okay, so let's go. Now I will move you there, and let's do something else, right? So it's not that you need to pay some extra effort. It's difficult because there are two people. It's very, very natural thing.
Finally, there is hand tracking. Many people have problems holding controllers, those with some forms of cerebral palsy, for example. You could attach the controllers to yourself in some way, but this can be uncomfortable and they can be easily dropped. By using WalkinVR in conjunction with Kinect and potentially other tracking devices, you can interact with VR directly using your hands as controllers.
I'm not sure if you know this game, but this is Beat Saber, right? This is numero uno in VR, and I've seen people playing Beat Saber with really conditions you wouldn't expect that they can do it, right? And I was once on the I will maybe talk about this later.
Indeed, many games and applications can be played this way, including workout routines. Put together, all these features mean you can finally focus on the whole point of the exercise, playing the game. We're so excited to be able to open these possibilities up to a wider audience. WalkinVR is available now on Steam. Install it today. Find out how much it can help you.
Yeah, hand tracking is also, here is a bit longer video about hand tracking. It's just not like a minute. You see, some of people are the same because they are my friends from Wrocław. I have here the controller, which I'm doing the assistance. Yeah, so I show it by purpose because this guy who has cerebral palsy, okay, I will be honest, I was impressed how well he did during the gameplay. When I was observing how he's acting, I was saying, oh my God, it will be difficult for him. But Then I was looking on the preview, and I saw how he's making progress, even though he basically now he's playing just with hands, right? Just with hands. And he was hitting quite well these boxes. Look, he did combo of 24 hits in a row, right? And it was first time for him to play VR. So it was really, I was really impressed by when I go sometimes and see. Sometimes I just go to record some videos, and I'm basically impressed how well these things work. And it was just one day, right? One day. If you give him regularly, that he can do it every, I don't know, maybe have some regular therapy sessions. He can do it every 2 or 3 exercises, right? This is, I would say, this is kind of very new experience for such cases. I want to show also. Hi, Thomas is now getting. So this is one of the first cases when I was using this adaptation feature, right? So you see he's basically doing very small movements. He has his hands on the pillow, but he is looking forward, right? Like he was having natural pose. And last video I want to show is, so it's in Polish, but there is a text. I want to show you because it's the very first deployment of
Avalon Active.
It's very first deployment of WalkinVR. It's 2018. We started collaboration, and they use it regularly, right? They use it like on the weekday. I think it's better than when they say, I won't repeat myself.
Dział Fundacji Avalon wirtualną rzeczywistość ma w swojej ofercie od października 2018 roku. Dzięki wirtualnej rzeczywistości podopieczni Avalon Active bawią się grając w gry. Jednocześnie uczestniczą w rehabilitacji, którą sprytnie przemyca fizjoterapeuta. Pacjenci wykonują odpowiednie ruchy, muszą czasami zwiększyć.
So you see the therapists, they probably playing some game from the some commercial game, right? So in theory, we cannot call it therapy, but in theory, you can do therapy with the ball, right? Or with the stick. So, but in general, WalkinVR is not a therapy solution. And you see, the therapist is actively assisting the person. It's not that he just take VR and play it, right? He's assisting him. He's ensuring that he has the proper position, that he has the proper challenge, right?
Zwiększyć jakiś zakres swojego ruchu, chcąc sprostać wymaganiom gry, wykonuje jakieś ruchy, pozycje, musi gdzieś dosięgnąć, coś złapać i tak dalej, więc to wykonuje w tym świecie gry, ale jednocześnie ten fizjoterapeuta właśnie przemyca rehabilitację, prowokując niejako wykonanie danych ruchów, po to, żeby ten trening wirtualny równał się z treningiem realnym, z rehabilitacją. To jest taka komponenta, dodatek. WalkinVR jest takim koniecznym uzupełnieniem terapii w wirtualnej rzeczywistości, jeżeli chcemy działać precyzyjnie z pacjentami. Nie wszystkie jednostki chorobowe, z którymi są nasi pacjenci, świetnie sobie radzą w standardowych parametrach gier. Niektóre dysfunkcje funkcjonalne naszych pacjentów wymagają do tego specjalnego dostosowania. I dzięki właśnie WalkinVR jest to możliwe, bo zmieniając różne parametry, Możemy tak zasterować już w tej wstępnej fazie udogodnieniami w grze, że możemy podnieść jakiś kontroler do góry, obrócić go o 360 stopni, przesunąć w czasie i przestrzeni, zwiększyć jego czułość. Przez to pacjenci z dużymi deficytami ruchowymi tak naprawdę realnie mogą odbyć trening w takich warunkach, że gra jest specjalnie dostosowana właśnie dla niej. I taką możliwość daje właśnie WalkinVR, że dostosowujemy indywidualnie dla danego podopiecznego warunki gry. Najczęściej korzystamy z gry BoxVR, AudioShield, Saber, Funhouse, Runaway. To chyba są takie najczęściej używane przez nas gry. Poza tym korzystamy z gry dostarczonej przez WalkinVR. Jest to gra dla osób z dużymi deficytami neurologicznymi, skierowana, dedykowana dla osób, które nie mają dowolnych, zamiarowych ruchów. Wirtualną rzeczywistość używamy do pracy praktycznie z każdym naszym pacjentem, z każdym beneficjentem. Są to pacjenci z przeróżnymi chorobami, jednostkami neurologicznymi, ortopedycznymi. Są to na przykład stwardnienia rozsiane, porażenia mózgowe, urazy rdzenia kręgowego, urazy czaszkowo-mózgowe, strofie mięśniowe, rdzeniowe zaniki mięśni, neuropatie, borelioza, no i wszelkie inne schorzenia jeszcze ortopedyczne. Zauważyliśmy, że pacjenci ćwiczący w wirtualnej rzeczywistości odważniej dokonują takich fizycznych postępów w trakcie treningu w wirtualnej rzeczywistości, a także ma to przełożenie później w realnym świecie podczas funkcjonalnej rehabilitacji. Tak jakby ta ćwiczenia wirtualnej rzeczywistości dopełniają tą rehabilitację klasyczną, funkcjonalną fizjoterapię. Avalon Acti zajmuje się rehabilitacją osób z niepełnosprawnością ruchową, osób powyżej 16 roku życia. Prowadzi rehabilitację dofinansowaną. Działania Avalonu Acti mają na celu zwiększenie sprawności i samodzielności osób z niepełnosprawnością ruchową.
Okay, maybe last element. It's not here on these materials, but there is the WalkinVR allows to play in the recline position. So Jeff mentioned about this. It has been added maybe not recently, but a few months ago, and I know this is also something that that people are using. So yes, so that's what we are trying to do. We encourage organization therapy centers to set up a VR room like that, because like it was said in the case study, they have regular sessions, and then every few regular sessions they have VR sessions. They use it since 2018, and I would say this is long time for a let's say game equipment, because they were testing the other equipments, and I've seen that often the people are not so engaged with these therapy games, because they are often interested for shorter time, right? Because the commercial games, they are made for $1 million, right? They spend $1 million on them. They have to be attractive, right? Yes, so I think that's basically all the things I wanted to say. And if there are any questions, and if anyone would be interested to have such a VR room, then I'm open for communication as well. I'm sure there are some contact info in the materials. So
Great. Thank you so much, Greg. I like that you went off script, but
yeah, totally,
but it was really useful, I think, to see kind of the applications and how WalkinVR can actually be used by different people with different levels of ability. So thank you so much for that. I think at this point, you can probably stop sharing your screen and we can just have a conversation and discussion. We'll open it up to all the attendees. If anyone has a question, you're welcome to just unmute yourself. You can turn your camera on if you want, but you don't have to. Or you can type any questions into the chat. I think there's always a little bit of a lull at the beginning. But I guess my biggest question for both of you, you both showed some really exciting and interesting possibilities. And I think a lot of people that are here and also people that will watch this later, the biggest question they'll have is, how can I have what you talked about? So I know, Jeff, you presented a ton of different things. Greg, you focused on WalkinVR, but maybe each of you could talk about, like, what is the thing that somebody could go out and use for their patient or use for their family member or use for themselves right now? I don't know who wants to go first.
I'll make a start then, and Greg can jump in. I mean, I will actually help Greg as well, because everybody needs to understand just how important what Greg's work is to the community at large, not only the accessible community, but also developers like us. So we developed a game called Adventure Climb VR a couple of years ago now. We released it around the same time as the Climb. They had somewhere between 2 and 5 million to make their game. We had zero budget. We were just doing it because we thought it was a cool thing to do because we're all climbers. We actually made the first version of it accessible. And in fact, to this day, a lot of it has some accessible features in it. For example, you can do the whole experience while seated in a wheelchair. A lot of people don't realize that. They feel like they need to be really reaching really high, and you can do that too, but you don't have to. Now, what's fantastic about WalkinVR and similar things too is, let's say you really want to reach that position up high and you can't stretch that far. WalkinVR has some adaptive capabilities to say what needs typically a foot of movement now only needs 6 inches of movement. And so it has this ability to do that extra reach for you. So one inch of real movement might be amplified to 3 inches in the virtual world. That means essentially that it fits outside of everyone's games. So developers like us don't need to include this in everything we do. Everyone can get WalkinVR, and almost every game all of a sudden becomes that much more playable. Is that fair, Greg?
Yeah, I hope.
Greg, I guess for you, the question is a little like, does WalkinVR work on any game in the Steam store, or it's like tailored and only works on certain games? And then do you have to set the parameters based on each individual person? So you set it up before each person uses it and change the parameters? Or yes, a little more about how it works. So it's downloadable on Steam. Is there a cost to it? These are some questions I think people probably would want to know.
Okay, can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay, so basically the WalkinVR works on most games.
Mm-hmm.
It doesn't work in the case when you are using not when you are using Oculus, but when the game is written directly in Oculus runtime. I don't know if this is not too technical, but basically, so we can say that if it should work with each game. If you are using Oculus, there is small chance that it will not work, right? We can say this way. But the most important games, I can say this way, important games, if they work even on Oculus. I don't want to go in technical details because it's too technical, but it should work. It works with most games. And so if you are asking if you should adapt it to each person, then yes, this is the answer, because each person is different, right? Like Jeff said, there is a feature that I call it boost the movement, right? So small movement in VR is made bigger in virtual reality. So it doesn't mean that every person needs, right? That you just put the person, you press the start WalkinVR, and now the game is accessible. You say, okay, you will need boost, right? Okay, so basically you need to understand this concept that WalkinVR gives you. It's not complicated. It's quite of natural. You think of this: what would I do if I could just take the hands and have ability to make the game, let's say, accessible. So when you understand this, let's say 4 or 5 features of WalkinVR, you start understanding, okay, this is, you have this, it's I would say it's very natural what WalkinVR is doing. It's not rocket science, right? It's quite simple. And you see, you have let's say spinal muscular atrophy. Your hands are lower, you cannot raise them high, so you just lift them up 20-30 centimeters, right? And often it's enough, right, for a person with SMI. That's from my experience. Even the person often can use the button. So for SMI, it's enough, right? Even you can, the people often can move the hands forward, backwards, but they are not high enough. And so basically it depends on the case. We have some plans to add some profiles which can make the things easier, but, and you ask about pricing. So we have two prices. One is commercial version, which is about $100 per month with full support, and other is Steam version, which is one-time payment for non-commercial users, about $40. And also on Steam, there is a free version, which is the full functionality, but there is a banner every 10 minutes, right? So,
Great.
So this is how it works. It's a bit risky, I would say, but yeah, but sometimes I don't think it would just be the right thing to not have the the same functionality in commercial like in non-commercial version, because basically the reclined gameplay feature was because 2 people asked me for this, right? And yeah, but I think yeah, that's how it.
Great, thank you. We just have a minute left. Does anyone have a burning question they want to ask? If not, I guess the last question I'll ask is just, what do you think is on the horizon in terms of accessibility? So what do you see coming up next? Jeff, do you want to go first?
Yeah, I can start, sure. One of the things Greg mentioned there is when we first started creating any XR game. So we've now created over 100 XR experiences. We've got 2.5 million downloads, 1,000 users a day in VR, and 50 million AR views, right? So we've done a fair bit of this stuff. Historically, you'd have to build a solution for every single experience and every single headset that's out there.
Right.
From a small developer standpoint, that's a real pain. For people even like Greg, right, and his team trying to create an experience that goes across these different devices, hence the reason it might not work on Oculus. Going forward, there's this thing called OpenXR, and there's other ones around it too, which we're trying to think of it a bit like the electrical cords that plug into your iPad or your Android phone. They're trying to standardize all of this stuff. We're trying to do the same thing with the XR and the VR community. So that means if we can create something and make it applicable for OpenXR, then it will just work across all these devices. And that goes for not only things like Greg's stuff, but also the haptic suits, also all of the different controllers. And so in the very near future, the whole VR ecosystem should hopefully be a lot more accessible.
Awesome. Thanks, Jeff. Greg, any future directions? You mentioned profiles for people, which sounds very useful.
So honestly, we are focusing on the promotion now, right? Because we have been working like 2 and more years, and now I think the baseline for the features is very it's very, let's say, set. it's very the features which are now satisfy a lot of needs. So okay, I can say this way, right? So yeah, this all will come if there will be, let's say, some demand for that. But the recline gameplay was something we could say extra added to the let's say baseline we were planning, and I think now the new features will in general the new things for accessibility will be something similar to accessible Xbox controller, right? Because but I'm not sure if I'm right, but the accessible Xbox controller was created like 10 years after Xbox was created, right? And VR we have only 4 years, which is actually more complicated to make it more public than Xbox. But I think that may be the future, maybe not near future, but the future that is far away from us. And
Awesome.
and I want to add one thing, and also I've seen the Oculus added like half a year ago some additional requirements for the new games. Basically, each game that goes into Oculus Store have some accessibility requirements, right? They are not as, let's say, sophisticated as WalkinVR, but they are there. And I think this is very good. For example, the ability to always play when you are sitting, right? It's something that wasn't in place even a few years ago, and now it's here, right? So it's a very good step forward.
Perfect. All right. Well, we're past the hours, so I just want to thank you both so much. Thank you, Jeff and Greg, for great talks and presentations. I have a feeling that this is going to be a very widely watched talk in the future because it's got lots of great information. So thank you again so much, and thanks everyone for attending.
Thank you.
All right.
Bye.
Bye.